So I'll be honest, I am utterly hyped for the old world. I miss Warhammer Fantasy so much. I miss the square bases, I miss the lined up rows of units, wheeling into charges, falling back, being overrun. All of it is just peak Warhammer for me. Also, apologies for my voice, I'm just coming down from a cold, so it kind of sucks. Bear with. But anyway, the old world seems to be bringing back everything that I loved about Warhammer Fantasy in an incredibly faithful way. However, they've done an article today which, I won't lie, there is one little bit in it which has shaken my excitement for the old world. It's very small, it's almost inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, but there is a change in the magic phase that, how can I word it? It's not that I don't like it per se, and I understand it, I just prefer the old fantasy battles way of how they did it. So magic in the old world is in many ways similar to how it was before. There are 8 laws of magic, each having a unique aspect to them. They are different though. There is battle magic, dark magic, high magic, demonology, illusion, elementalism, necromancy, and war magic. They're the ones in the main rulebook, and presumably that will get expanded upon as new armies and army books come out. Your mage will select a law at the start of the battle, or potentially several laws if they have a high enough wizard level, and then depending on their wizard level as well, they will know a certain amount of spells they can use in the game. Much like 8th edition fantasy, there are 7 spells, one of them being the signature spell which a wizard will always know, in addition to any other they know from that law. But here's where things start to change. There is no set magic phase now. We knew that was announced a long time ago. Instead, spells are now spread out into categories, and that determines when and where you can cast them. So, for example, we can see here there are enchantment and hex spells, which can buff or debuff enemies, and you use those in the strategy phase. There are conveyance spells, which funnily enough are used in the movement phase. There are magic missiles and vortexes, which are used in the shooting phase, and then you have assailment spells, which are your combat phase spells. So now, instead of all being front-loaded right before shooting and combat starts, which is where the magic phase was in Warhammer Fantasy, you don't always quite know just when a unit is going to get that burst of speed, or when they might get extra attacks in combat, or get extra shooting or extra damage in their shooting. In Warhammer Fantasy, you would know after the magic phase was done, this unit is going to have that buff for the combat phase, it's going to have that buff for the shooting phase. I can kind of plan around it and work around it. It seems to be a bit more, in my opinion anyway, uncertain now, and it gives a bit more excitement and a bit more flexibility into how spell casting is going to affect the game, I think, which I do have to say, I really like. The miscast table also makes a very welcome return, going off when you roll a natural double 1 on your casting attempt, although also this now happens if you roll a double 1 on your dispel attempt as well. This is a little bit different from how it was in Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition, where rolling a double 1 would not cast a spell, of course, but you didn't miscast. You actually miscast if you rolled 2 or more 6s, and that is part of the change that we'll get to in a little bit that I'm not a huge fan of. But yes, if you roll a double 1 on your dispel as well, you have to roll on the miscast table too. This is a new rule called Outclassed in Art, and it forces you also to suffer the wrath of some of the terrifying results on the miscast table, so it does make dispelling a bit more interactive and exciting as well, whereas back in 8th it was just like, okay, I'll roll, see if I dispel, oh I don't, oh never mind. This gives you a bit more of a, do I actually want to risk dispelling that, or is it kind of negligent enough that I can let it go off and not risk that miscast table result? On the table itself, some of the results do seem to be fairly similar. We see Dimensional Cascade and Calamitous Detonation, which are the same worst results as they were in 8th edition. Power Drain is a bit of an easy escape, you just can't cast any more spells this turn. This is actually a big change from the old version, which permanently reduced your wizard levels for the rest of the game. I think overall, this new table seems much more forgiving than it was before. It actually has a few quote-unquote good results. If you just roll well enough, you still get that spell off. You just suffer some little down effects on the back of it. Some more good news as well is that they show off one of the profiles for the new armies. The Bretonnian handmaidens get a look in, either in the form of a damsel or the more powerful prophetess. Both have a fairly typical T3 stat line with 2 or 3 wounds, and no real melee prowess to speak of, so that's kind of what you should be expecting. This isn't AOS, where most characters can have up to like 20 wounds or whatever. Most characters, even the most powerful ones, will probably have 4 or 5, maybe 6 if they're a really, really big demon or something, but 2 or 3 wounds is fairly standard and fairly typical for most sort of Lord and Hero level characters. However, whilst they do not have much melee to speak of, the Damsel is a level 1 and the Prophetess is a level 3 wizard, and they can choose from Battle, Elementalism and Illusion Magic. Now what I really do love about seeing these profiles is that we now have confirmation that things like the magic item upgrade system is indeed coming back. The Damsel can take 50 points and the Prophetess can take 100 points of magic items. So that means that, fingers crossed, things like your Dispel Scrolls, your Scrolls of Power, your Wands of Jet, your Crowns of Command, your Armors of Destiny, all that and all the other awesome stuff that was in sort of the army books and the main rulebook will be making some form of reappearance, or at least some of it will be. And for me, that was part of what made fantasy so cool. As a Vampire Counts player, I still have fond memories of my Quick Blood Red Fury Vampire Lord with an Ogre Blade who would just charge in and do like 8 strength 8 attacks into the enemy every single round. It was just so much fun. So that customization and kind of build a hero style of gameplay with the magic items is coming back, and I am all here for it. We also got to see some unique spells. We got to see Hammer Hand, which is the battle magic signature spell. This does 2d3 strength 4 hits into an enemy unit in combat because it is an assailment spell. Glittering Robe is an enchantment, granting your caster and a unit therewith -1 to be hit. And Stormcall is a hex that reduces enemy movement and initiative by 1. Now what I really do like about this is that you can't massively stack buffs and debuffs anymore. They specifically state on the spell itself that it overwrites the last one if you try to cast 2 or more hexes or enhancements onto a unit. So you can't anymore, for example, put 4 different hexes onto one enemy squad and just turn that into this completely useless blob anymore. That's not how it works. So I think that's a really nice, good quality of life change. I really like that. I hated the fact that you could just massively debuff the enemy's Death Star or massively buff your Death Star and make it utterly unkillable. Now you do actually have to think about your spells and maybe spread them around the enemy army or spread them around your own army a little bit more. We also get told that Dispelling now has a much more limited range. It is 18 inches for 1st and 2nd level casters, and it's 24 inches for 3rd and 4th level casters. So now you really are going to have to plan your positioning and make sure that your best dispellers are close enough to actually impact enemy spells and actually get rid of them, rather than just having them safe sitting back in your own deployment, dispelling the enemy magic all game long, which is what you could do sort of in 8th edition fantasy quite a bit. So all in all, there is a lot of good stuff. But here's the one thing I don't like. So in old fantasy, you would roll 2d6 and that was your power pool of dice. And then you could use those and decide how many dice you wanted to throw at a certain spell. So if you rolled a 6 and a 4, you would have 10 power dice. And you could say, throw 4 dice at a spell that had a casting value of 10, knowing you would most likely get it. Or you could instead throw 6 dice, which was the maximum you could throw at a single spell, and just hope that you got the highest number possible to make it as hard for your opponent to dispel. And if you rolled a double 6, this is another difference to how it is in the old world. If you rolled a double 6, it would not only go off with irresistible force, so it couldn't be dispelled, but then you would also miscast. So it wasn't on the double 1 like it is in the old world, it was on 2 or more 6s. So it gave you a really big risk reward in terms of how much you wanted to put into this spell, how much you wanted it to go off, and also trying to bait your opponent's dispel dice out before you got to the big spells you wanted. Now, however, in the old world, it's much more like that AOS old 40k psychic system where you just roll 2d6 and you add your wizard level to it. So a wizard level 4 would roll 2d6 and get +4 to the roll, giving you an average of around 11, so it would make things like the 7+ to cast Hammer Hand really quite reliable. Now, as I said, I get why GW have done this. It is easier to manage and to control and just to keep track of, rather than having yet another resource / minigame to disrupt the main game. But for me, half the fun of fantasy was that magic phase minigame. And I used to love working out how many dice you had, what spells you needed to get off, trying to bait out your opponent's dispel dice with some of your easier ones whilst leaving enough dice to reliably get off the main spells you wanted, or just, as I said, going all in with a 6 dice spell and almost hoping for a miscast just because you needed that Dwellers Below to go off and you didn't even care if your wizard died as a result. It was just, for me, so much fun and so much excitement and so much more chaotic, and I feel like this new method is going to be, yes, more simplistic and arguably better for the game overall, but probably a little bit less fun. So, I mean, all in all, I think I am still going to enjoy this magic system. I do like the idea of casting various spells in various phases and being able to plan ahead a bit, whilst also making your opponent exactly unsure of what spells you're going to be casting in, say, the movement phase, the combat phase, or the shooting phase. I do really think, as I said, it is a healthier way to do magic compared to old fantasy. It's just, I will really miss 6 dicing spells. I will really miss rolling my extra channeling dice to add it to my pool of dice. Just that resource management that won't be in the old world, I will miss, because whilst this new system will probably be quicker and easier and better overall, that resource management minigame was easily one of my favourite parts of Warhammer Fantasy. So that is it for the magic overview of the old world. What do you think of it though? Is it better than the old fantasy magic system, or do you prefer having that dedicated magic phase and pools of power dice in the game? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.